This is WCN, the Whole Care Network. You talk, we listen. Content presented on the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed during this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent views of the Whole Care Network. Always consult your physician for medical and fitness advice, and always consult your attorney for legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
Have you ever met anybody that has caregiving on their bucket list of things to do in life?
Beyond caregiving, how do we care?
We also have to care for ourselves.
How do we treat friends, family, strangers we meet?
Forget it.
How do we heal? The physical, social, financial, spiritual.
Hello.
By creating healing ties. Tying it all together like a bow tie. With your host, Christopher McClellan, the Bow Tie Guy.
Well, greetings, everyone. It is Christopher McClellan. You know me as the Bow Tie Guy. And welcome to another episode of Healing Ties 2.0, featured on the Whole Care Network. We are in our final week of our 30 and 30 podcast, and we are having a great time recording, visiting with friends, meeting new friends, and getting ready to launch our new Whole Care Network website on December 1st, which is just a little bit of more than a week away. And as you know, we're doing our 30 and 30 podcast to celebrate National Family Caregivers Month and the soft launch of our new website. So when you go to the new site, well, you got to go to the old site to get to the new site, but you'll see the link to the new site right on the front page at thewholecarenetwork.com. And when you get to the new site, you'll meet a fellow by the name of Bo, because Bo ties things together on the Whole Care Network. As soon as you see Bo, you're going to get it 100%. During our soft launch, we are asking all of our listeners to provide us with feedback on the new site so that we can continue to build the site where you can easily find your favorite podcasts, favorite blogs, and videos. Oh, and by the way, you'll be able to search content on the new Whole Care Network site via our 4 pillars of care: physical, social, financial, and spiritual health. And be on the lookout for our new YouTube channel featuring live shows, our streaming 24/7 radio station, and a few other exciting changes coming to the Whole Care Network in 2021. Well, enough for me. My guest on this episode of Healing Ties is the chief storyteller at AriJoe Productions, Steve Bessermen. Following a career in network television and healthcare marketing communications, Steve founded AriJoe Productions for the purpose of realizing his lifelong ambition of bringing his parents' Holocaust survival story to the screen. He served as executive producer, writer, and director of this award-winning independent documentary. Only a Number has appeared in film festivals, has been broadcast on PBS stations across the country, and is being used in the curriculum of New Jersey schools throughout the New Jersey Commission on Holocaust Education. And in 2015, Steve expanded AriJoe Productions to provide affordable video documentary storytelling to small to mid-sized businesses, nonprofit organizations, and people who wish to capture, share, and preserve their family history. Steve Besserman, my good friend, so good to have you on Healing Ties podcast.
So good to be here with you, Chris.
You know, I have a special place in my heart for you because of the work you've done for us on the Whole Care Network and the little documentary you produced for us. And I couldn't do these 30 and 30 podcasts without inviting you to on the show to tell your story and all the great work that you're doing, sharing people's story across the country. So welcome.
Well, thank you. And I can say with all confidence and true feeling, the same goes to you.
So tell us a little bit about the documentary, and then we'll get into some of the work that you're doing with sharing stories with senior living centers across the country.
Right. Well, my journey to the documentary, titled "Only a Number," and it was actually my mom's choice for the title, was really began over 40 years ago, and my parents were survivors of the Holocaust. It was actually the circumstances under which they met. My mom was from Hungary, and her name was Aranka. Everybody in the family called her Ari. And my dad was from Poland, and his name was Joseph, but everybody in the family called him Joe. So thus AriJoe Productions. And I started AriJoe Productions at the time in 2010 with the sole ambition of bringing my parents' story of their meeting, their survival of the Holocaust, their love story to the screen. And But as I started to say, it actually began over 40 years ago, quite innocently, actually. My mom had taken to a personal exercise to improve her written English.
Okay.
My mom used to write in what I called Hunglish. It was kind of like English letters, but Hungarian phonetics. And she would sit down and pick out words from the dictionary that were unfamiliar to her, and then try to write their definitions next to it, and then try to use those words in everyday sentences. And so on a visit to my parents, my mom came over to me and gave me an open notebook and asked me to check out her work. And I took the notebook and I saw this list of words with their definitions written next to them. And then on the opposite page was a lengthy paragraph that was just sort of a mundane diary entry. It was she had gone shopping with one of her aunts. One of her sisters, one of my aunts. And she just related that experience, but there was something on the shelf in the store that reminded her of an experience that she had in Auschwitz-Birkenau. And I was not a stranger to these stories. I knew from a very young age that my parents had survived this thing called the Holocaust, and it explained why there were numbers tattooed on their arms, and why I didn't have any grandparents, and a number of things about their attitudes of life. And but when I read these few sentences that related that experience, it just really kind of smacked me in the head. And my mom was completely innocent, didn't realize what I was reacting to, and she was just concerned about how she did in her writing. And I, when she came over to me and she said, "So, Stephen, what do you think of my work?" And I just said, "Mom, this is really incredible. You've really improved your written English. But when I read these sentences about that experience in Birkenau, it makes me want to ask you to do something that's going to be really difficult. It's going to be difficult physically because there's going to be a lot of work involved, but more so it'll be difficult emotionally, because what would mean everything for me to have for myself, for my children when I have them, and their children when they have them, is to capture your experience prior to the Holocaust and during the Holocaust, and then after the Holocaust, when you met and married Dad and came to America and had me." And my mom was very pensive, and she didn't really respond. But we went in and had dinner and didn't really talk any further about it. But about 6 weeks later, when I came back to visit my parents again, my mom left the room for just a moment and came back holding this stack of about 6 or 7 notebooks. And she came up to me, and I stood up, and I didn't know what she was doing, but she handed me these notebooks, and she just looked at me and she said, "Stephen, I did what you asked me to do." And I was overwhelmed with emotion, but as I began to open the first book and leaf through the pages, page after page, of her notes, of her experience in her own hand, that's when the responsibility was falling to me to find ways to share that story and treasure and preserve that story. And it wasn't until many years later, with my experience in video production and other things that I had read, and other diaries that I had read, and other books and films that I had seen, that I came to the conclusion that what I needed to do was to use my mom's words from her story, go back to all the places of her experience. And she had been diagnosed with dementia in these years, and she was losing her memories in pretty progressive fashion, and including having written these notebooks.
Oh, goodness.
So I embarked on the production of Only a Number, and I went back to all of the locations in my mom's experience to look for remnants of the past in the present. And I found many. And I used the narrative, I used her writing from these diaries to tell her story. And that's how Only a Number came to be. And since I produced the film, it's been at film festivals, it's been on PBS stations around the country. But one of the most important things to me is that it's being used for educational purposes. And I still show the film at universities and high schools and different communities. And I continue to share the story and the importance of standing up against hatred and prejudice whenever and wherever they exist.
Oh, goodness. That's I know we've talked about this, the documentary before, but to hear it again and hear you explain it, it just warms my heart that you've been able to capture something that's so meaningful and so helpful to people. And, the idea of story sharing, people sometimes think that they don't really have a story, but everybody has a story, and telling stories are cathartic.
I couldn't agree more. And, you and I share that. we have a lot in common when it comes to storytelling. And it's true, everybody does have a story. And I think we both believe that storytelling is the most impactful way that we can communicate with one another. And, right. I just think that storytelling brings out the emotion. People do things for practical reasons, and throughout their life, they're doing things or making decisions based on some practical thinking. But it's at the emotional level where people really connect and share their own humanity.
Right.
And in fact, you and I met under the circumstances of you sharing your story, which is
right.
an incredible story, and it was my honor and pleasure to help you. not that you need all that much help, but to help you tell your story in that short video that we did together.
Sure. One of the mottos on the Whole Care Network, and I know you would agree with this one. It's through story sharing where diversity meets the road to collaborate on a common cause. And when we know just a little bit about somebody else, we recognize that we're really not all that much different.
True. Very true. Very true.
So how do you get somebody to feel comfortable in telling their story?
Well, I help a lot of different people tell different stories. Some of them are business stories. Some of them are, nonprofit or cause-based stories. Right. Mm-hmm. And some of them are, like me, capturing, preserving, and sharing their family stories, particularly of their seniors, right. While they still have the time to do so. And I think, like my first step is, like you, I treat things very conversationally. So yes. The first thing I do is, whether it's over the phone or in person, I get to know the person. I get to know a little bit about the person. So I ask some, really broad stroke questions that just sort of help me start to understand, what that person's story is. To your earlier point, a lot of people don't think they have a story,
Right.
but everybody does. And so with a little bit of probing and a little bit of conversation, it allows people to get to know me a little bit, and I share my story right up front, so that when I tell the story of Only a Number and how AriJoe Productions came to be, and a little bit about my background, then it immediately, usually,
Yeah.
makes a connection with somebody, and because I'm sharing my story, it just opens them up more to be able to share their story. But I reserve really, in-depth questioning for, the time when we get together and I actually roll camera and record them telling their story. And then I go in with a list of pretty standard, I'll say standard questions that open up, where somebody was born, what was their life like growing up, where they went to school, how they met their significant other, or et cetera, throughout the phases of life, and general questions. But then as somebody's telling me their story, then I sort of tailor specific questions that take me down the path of their story and their life or their experience. And then I go back to the edit room. I'll also record footage that supports their story. So if it's a business, obviously them, interacting with people and operating their business, whatever that may be, or if it's a nonprofit group, I'll go on location and film some activities associated with their nonprofit group. If it's a personal story, I'll capture people either performing hobbies, or if they work, doing their work, or getting together with family, or whatever it is that relates to their stories. And then I'll usually ask people to give me photographs or home video or old home movies or whatever, and I'll incorporate that all into the assembly of them telling their story.
I remember the process very well.
Of course you do.
And it's a very thorough process, but it's a very relaxed and a conversational process. And I would encourage everybody to do one of these with Steve. But,
me too.
yeah. So, and you've actually captured some stories from senior living communities.
Yeah, I have. I've done, on my website, the first, as I was expanding AriJoe, and sort of targeted, you have your four pillars, and I have sort of my three, well, for lack of a better term, target audiences. So small to mid-sized businesses is one, nonprofit groups, nonprofit organizations is another. And then these individual family stories, family histories, is another. And so when I was first coming up with this idea of expanding AriJoe to do these kind of stories, I was familiar with a good friend's mother, Bunny, was her name, and is her name. I'm proud to say that Bunny this past July, just passed her 103rd birthday.
Oh, awesome.
But Bunny was turning 97 at the time that I expanded AriJoe, and I talked to my friend, and I had met Bunny on a couple of occasions, just found her to be, really interesting and very conversational and forthcoming about her own personal history. And I asked my friend to ask Bunny if she were willing to have me do this video of her story. And she somewhat reluctantly agreed. She actually was the classic case of somebody saying, well, I've lived a very ordinary life. I don't think anybody's going to find this interesting. And I said, Bunny, when we do this, and I appreciate you doing it, I said, if nothing comes of it, I'll turn everything I have over to your family, and at least they will have you telling your story for their children and their grandchildren, your great grandchildren. So she liked that idea. So
what a gift.
So that was it. And so P.S., not only did that happen, but everybody loves Bunny. She's wonderful. She's got a great story. And her video, or I should say a short version of her videos on my website. Her family got 3 times the length of that. But it was also, the short version was, with Bunny's permission, was broadcast on NJTV, New Jersey Public Television. And they had Bunny and I come up to the studio, and they interviewed both of us about the film, and they shared that story. So that's kind of how I go about it. So I use Bunny as sort of the classic example for people who are not necessarily interested in having their story broadcast or made public, but I think everybody relates to this aspect of passing their story on as, it's their legacy. It's their legacy to their family, and I come across people all the time, young people who are very interested and maybe missed the opportunity to get the story of their grandparents or certainly their great-grandparents, and they have a lot of regrets. And now, most recently, with the pandemic, I'm coming across a number of people who missed that opportunity and no longer have that opportunity. So,
yeah, I'm thinking, I'm 63. I didn't know 3 of my 4 grandparents, and how wonderful it would have been to have some footage. In fact, I've never seen a picture of my grandmother or grandfather in Canada.
Wow.
I mean, they had both, I think my grandfather had died before I was even born. But when you think about how technology, where we are now, and preserving these memories and what they're going to do for generations that come after us, it does tell the story of why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's been this huge boon in things like, Ancestry.com and people, going through the DNA testing and, checking their background, and which I think is wonderful. But, to me, there's nobody better to tell their story than the person
who's involved in it. And there's no better person than Steve Besserman to help them.
Gee, thank you, Chris. Thank you.
Well, Steve, I think this is a great place to take our break. Good. And as you know, I forewarned you on our 30 and 30 podcast, I'm asking everybody to let us in on a fun fact about you that I may not know, and our listeners will definitely want to know. So I got to put your thinking cap on, okay? Okay. So you're listening to Healing Ties on the Whole Care Network. We will be right back.
Tomorrow on Healing Ties 2.0.
We were living our lives completely by the fact that we thought she was going to die literally any day. And so that was really rough because it sent me into this fight or flight mode every single day.
Right.
Where I wasn't taking care of myself. My mom wasn't taking care of herself. We were the main caregivers at that time. And so it was, 1 year into it that I said to my mom, finally, we can't live like this anymore. We can't do this anymore. And she's like, oh, you feel that way too? She needed permission almost to feel that way. Hi, I'm Lindsay Carretero with Point Blanc Voice and Speech. Tomorrow I will be on the podcast Healing Ties, and I hope that you come to listen. I'll be talking about my relationship with my grandmother. Her name is Grandma Angel, and she really was a true angel.
Join us tomorrow and every day in November for 30 shows in 30 days. Healing Ties 2.0. Available at thewholecarenetwork.com/healing ties and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.
Well, welcome back, everybody. I am continuing with my delightful conversation with Steve Besserman from AriJoe Productions. So, Steve, this time is now. I'm going to put you on the spot. We want to know one fun fact about you that I may not know, and I I know our listeners are going to want to know.
Wow. Okay. So I don't know how many fun facts I have, or I have a lot of facts. I don't know how much fun they are, but I one that comes to mind is just, we've all probably started out life, I've come across some people who knew at the outset from very early ages what they wanted to pursue career-wise or professionally or whatever. I'm not one of them.
Ditto.
So I would say the fun fact I'll share with you is my first career aspiration as a young boy was to be a dentist. Why? I don't know. But that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to pursue dentistry. And that lasted a couple of years. And then following that, I said, you know what? If I can't be a dentist, then I probably no longer want to be a dentist. I want to be a hairstylist. And I just always, when I was getting to the stage where I was, growing my hair long, and I did have hair back then, Chris, by the way.
Well,
I know your audience can't really see me, but
we've both seen each other, and we both know we don't have any hair on
That's
top.
right. So that's a good thing that I decided against that. And then when I was in high school, I decided that I wanted to be a lawyer. And in my high school yearbook, under my picture, it says lawyer. And I got to college, and I applied to college as a pre-law major. And when I took my first political science course, I just sort of looked around the room and was listening to the professor, and I said, no, 4 years of this, I can't do that. So my good fortune was I was in the cafeteria having coffee with a couple of guys that I had become friendly with. And one of them started to tell me about the television studio at Queens College. Queens College, part of the City University of New York. And they said, they will hire you and pay you to work in the studio. And you can work the cameras, and you can set lights, and you can do recordings, sound recordings, and do different things. And I said, gee, let me check that out. And they were paying, whatever minimum wage was at the time. And I said, okay, that could be pretty cool. And I went over to the studio, and I walked in the studio, and I looked around and started talking to the technicians that were working in the studio. And I said, it was like the angels sang, like, oh. So bam, that was it.
that began your story sharing career.
That began my story sharing career.
Oh, goodness, Stephen. It's so good to reconnect with you and have you on the show. And but let our listeners know how they can find out more about you and where they can find the documentary. Just give all your contact information out.
Okay, well, I'd be happy to do that. First things first, they can visit my website, which is www.arijoe.com. And basically, my website is a one continuous scrolling page with a lot of different
A lot of different
stories.
A lot of different stories, yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And now at this point, I've actually put Only a Number and made it available on YouTube. And the link to you can do it directly at YouTube, but if you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page at AriJoe.com, you will find information and a link to be able to view Only a Number. And I'm on Facebook. I have an AriJoe Productions Facebook page. I am Twitter at Stephen Besserman and Twitter. And I have a personal Facebook page, but I have a Facebook page for AriJoe Productions. I have a Facebook page for Only a Number. There's actually a website for onlyanumber.com. Which will tell you all about the background of the film, which I shared a lot with you today. And so those are the ways of getting in touch with me.
And you'll also have a page, a little access page on the Whole Care Network as well.
There you go.
With all your contact information, because you have not only have you been a good and trusted friend, you're a partner that's helping grow the network, and I'm just very grateful that we've been introduced. And on a side note, we had Jody on a couple of weeks ago. So,
oh, great.
yeah,
Yeah. Jody O'Donnell Ames.
And Jody O'Donnell Ames.
An angel that walks the earth. Yeah,
yes.
Jody's very special. I did a documentary.
You
for
did
Jody,
a documentary.
We
should plug that one.
Yeah. Well, hopefully Jody did, but you can find that. Jody's got it on YouTube, and I have a link to that on my website
Hope
as
Loves
well.
Company. Yeah.
Hope Loves Company, a wonderful, wonderful organization.
I think that was episode 3 or 4, but I'll have to go back. But it's all there on our 30 and 30 podcast. But, Steve, with the stories you share and the work that you do, you are certainly someone who's creating healing ties all around us. I can't thank you enough for joining me today.
Well, thank you, Chris. I really appreciate it, and I'm so appreciative and in awe of the work that you do. Because talk about creating healing ties and performing a service across your 4 pillars, and the way you help a lot of people is really, really wonderful and critical.
I appreciate that, and we've got a lot more work to do ahead of us, and we have some more stories to share as well with you. So, well, unfortunately, that does it for this episode of Healing Ties. As you know, I'm your host, Christopher McClellan. You know me as the Bowtie Guy. I've created a life to love after caregiving ends by sharing stories, resources, and being with awesome people like Steve Besserman. Healing Ties is produced in the posh studios of Oddbox Production in downtown St. Louis, Missouri, and is part of the Whole Care Network. Check out the soft launch of our new Whole Care Network website, and be sure to meet Bo. You're going to get Bo when you see him. And subscribe to Healing Ties wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. We'll see you for another episode of Healing Ties, tomorrow, as we continue with our 30 podcasts in 30 days to celebrate National Family Caregivers Month. Thanks for listening. Take care. Bye for now.
Ciao.
This is WCN, the Whole Care Network. You talk, we listen.